Arizona is evolving rapidly, shaped by technology, innovation, and a shifting economy. Today's students face new challenges, gaps in digital access, emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, and preparing for jobs that look very different from the past. But this moment also brings opportunity. Our education system can adapt to equip students to lead in the future, and along the way, civic engagement can help build the collaboration needed for real progress. So how do we ensure Arizona students are ready for a changing world? Let's welcome our panelists. Peter Boyle from the Center for the Future of Arizona, Jaime Casap, former Chief Education Evangelist at Google, Jessica Pacheco from the Arizona Board of Regents, and Katie Ratlief from the Common Sense Institute. Thank you all for being here. So some of these panels, you kind of build up to something. We're not going to do that with this one. So Katie, we're going to go really big. I'm going to ask it this way. What does a bold, future-ready vision of education look like for Arizona? And let's just blow people's minds.
Absolutely. The future of education in Arizona and really all over the country is customization and individualization. You are going to see programs that meet a student's unique individual needs, allow them to fulfill their full capacity and potential. In Arizona today, the data says half of students are already choosing the school that works best for them, whether that's district open enrollment, a charter school, a micro school, a private school. And the fastest growing segment of education in our state is homeschool. It was traditionally about 2%. It's recently grown to about 6%. So still small, but it's tripled in size just in the last few years. So you will continue to see schools innovate and provide that customized experience, or they will start to lose students. We have fewer and fewer K-12 aged kids in our state. And so everybody is having to fight for students and provide a more customized experience that will prepare kids for a world that we don't even know what kind of jobs are going to be available and opportunities will be available for them.
You stole one of my questions for later, but we'll get to that a little bit. Jessica, what are your thoughts on this big, bold, what's coming next for Arizona students?
So I'd love to put this into context,
Please,
right?
Sure.
Because right now I think the world is at an inflection point. And what I mean by that is that the disruption that's coming with the next iteration of technology is unfathomable. It wasn't that long ago, and I love this, I heard it on a podcast this summer, that humanity thought the world is flat. Right? We learned that the world wasn't flat. But when we thought the world was flat, we didn't know the questions to ask. And right now, with the advent of where we are with artificial intelligence and how rapidly things are evolving and how rapidly information is changing, the world's flat for us. We don't know the questions to ask. And so what I think is that not only do we need to be customized, right? We also need to be ready for an entirely new paradigm. So to your point on collaboration and engaging with all of us, meaning all of Arizonans coming together to ensure that we have enough flexibility in our infrastructure to be able to meet that need, a need we can't define today. So it's really exciting and it's a little scary.
Jaime, you know, a Google guy, we're expecting you to have all the answers. So
Yeah.
what's your answer to this?
I wish I did. I'll take a different angle on this, which is, let's say education isn't broken. Let's say education is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is take a population, about 80%, give them basic education, and make sure that they can do basic things. We don't live in that world anymore. So it's not that education is necessarily broken, it's that the world is, like you said, dramatically changing. And so what we need to do is think about what are the best learning models that we have, and then how do we use technology to recreate what that learning should look like. And so for me, customization makes sense, personalization makes sense, but what is it that we're customizing? What is it that we're gonna personalize? What I want us to focus on are human skills. The human skills that our students are gonna need for the future, no matter what the technology looks like.
I really want to ask about human skills. Peter, let me give you a chance first.
Sure. So coming from the Center for the Future of Arizona, one of the things that we do is ask Arizonans what matters the most to you. And we hear loud and clear that education is one of the, if not the most important issues for Arizonans for our future. It touches every other issue. And we also hear from Arizonans that they're looking for schools to have the flexibility to meet the needs of every child. They're looking for college and career connected pathways. And I think whatever path we go down as a state in terms of education, an important thing is to do it collaboratively. So how can we bring together cross-sector solutions from K-12, from higher education, from business and industry to help adapt our system in this changing world to truly meet the needs of every student?
Well, so what are your thoughts on the how part of that then?
Sure. So one of the things we've been leading on at Center for the Future of Arizona with district partners across the state is the Arizona Personalized Learning Network. Traditional education, the teacher's at the front of the classroom, students are in rows. In a personalized learning environment, forgive my mixed metaphor here, but the student becomes the co-pilot. They get to not just plot the course for their education for where they want to go, but they get to co-design that solution with a teacher and with their peers to make that happen. And we've seen huge success in terms of student engagement and early student outcome increases from schools and districts that have adopted personalized learning models.
Jessica, I'm going to lead on the title you have with the Board of Regents. So first of all, give us a quickie. I think people may have heard of the Board of Regents when an ASU football coach gets a raise or something like that. There's a lot more to it than that. So give us an idea on what it is that the Regents do, but then also how can the Regents specifically get involved in this to make sure that the university students are ready for this next step?
So the Arizona Board of Regents is the governing body over the state's 3 public universities, Northern Arizona University, ASU, and the U of A. And we are appointed by the governor and ratified by the Senate. And there are 8-year terms, and there are 9 of us, and we are staggered. And so we work with the Arizona Board of Regents team on the governance, right, on running the state universities. We are not the presidents. We need the presidents, and we need their teams doing everything that they're doing. But we have both a fiduciary and a governance responsibility over the universities. And so what we can do is ensure that the presidents and their very, I would say, adept teams have the tools they need and the flexibility they need in order to adapt quickly in this world. Like I'll take a current example where we had financial models that were heavily reliant on foreign students. There were some changes in sort of the visa structure recently, right? And so our university teams had to quickly adapt to a completely new world, if you will, right? And did a marvelous job in sort of identifying new sources of revenue and in order to ensure that they also were reaching out to those students and keeping them engaged until they could actually physically be here, to your point, right? There's the learning environment that we're operating in is changing and changing really quickly, and our customers' needs are changing. You know, so my children, my oldest is 24 and I have 2 18-year-olds, my secret shoppers at the ASU and U of A. But my children don't know a world without cell phones. They don't know a world without a smartphone. And when I graduated from college, I didn't have a cell phone, right? And my first one was a Motorola Flip. And I mean, their world and their experience with technology and also their relationship with information is completely different than mine. And so as we sit in decision-making seats, we need to ensure that the organizations that we're engaged with have the flexibility they need in order to adapt to a world, frankly, that I can't even define.
Yeah. Jaime, I'm going to go to you on this one because you were former evangelist, education evangelist at Google.
Yeah.
Okay, so
That's a really cool title.
Yeah, I'm in awe of you right now. So give us an idea of what that meant, and then I'll dig into another question for you.
I mean, the brief history of that, I was at Google for 15 years. I launched, if you're using a Google tool or a Chromebook, it's my fault. You can yell at me later. But I launched all the Google tools and Chromebooks into education. I left in 2020. But the title was really about, what I was really an evangelist about was education. I'm a first-generation American, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York. I grew up in poverty. I grew up on welfare and food stamps. And education was the silver bullet, right? Education is the reason I'm sitting here talking to you. And more importantly, and here's the thing that we don't think about, especially for those of you who are educators in our classrooms, is that the impact that you have on students goes on for generations and generations and generations, right? Like, I don't remember my last boss. I left Google 5 years ago. I don't remember my boss's name, but I remember my 3rd grade teacher's name, right? That's number one. Number two is my kids. I have 3 of them. 2 of them are older, living in New York. I have one every decade. I like having one at a time. But my kids are doing well because of my education. That's the impact that's the economic impact of education, is that it goes on for generations and generations and generations. And so that's what I was an evangelist about, was the role of education. What I saw was that technology, and again, if all we do is take technology and put it on top of our current system, then all we're doing is making the old system faster and more efficient. What we need to do is ask ourselves, what are the best models? What are the best ideas? Well, who are the best thinkers in education? And then how do we take technology and bring those ideas to life? And that's what I evangelize still today. I don't have to be at Google to do that.
I want to have everyone talk about that, but I want to go back to the human skills question
Yeah.
because we think of a Google guy who's talking about technology, and yet you also gave us that juxtaposition of remembering your third grade teacher. So what are the human skills you're talking about, and how do human skills balance with the fact that we are going to need technology, we're going to use technology as we always have, and maybe in different ways?
Right. And this is one of the things I'm going to say that no one's going to believe, but I have the receipts for this. I have again 3 kids. The oldest today's her birthday. Happy birthday to Elaine. She's 34 today, and I've never looked at any of their report cards. I don't look at report cards. I have an 11-year-old, and I don't look at her report cards. I go in and I ask questions about her curiosity, questions about her executive management skills. I ask questions about this: can she think? Can she learn? I want my kid to be able to know. I want her to have the ability to learn, the ability to think, the ability to be in the community, the ability to tell stories, the ability to self-manage. Those are the human skills that I'm talking about. And the content only supplements those skills. So we got to reverse that. We got to go away from like they need to know these 5 facts to saying these are the skills they need to have, and let's use these facts to build those skills.
Well, what's also good is your kids have never had to hide their report card from them.
And you know what? And they do great.
I'd
So-
like to
please,
expound on that just a little bit, because I agree with you entirely, where we have an education system that's based on rote memorization. And we now have tools that give us information faster than our brains can work, right? And so if we could free up that capacity, right, to be able to self-manage better, to be able to be more engaged citizens, to be able to give a speech and elicit an emotional response, we're better off as a community and a country.
Katie?
I think the challenge of this moment in education is that we have to be prepared to go fast and slow at the same time. So we have to prepare students for this world that we can't even define yet. We have to make sure that we are enabling them to learn these human skills that are going to be so important, that they have the curiosity and the intellectual capacity to ask the right questions and navigating the world. We also have to make sure they can read.
Yeah.
And Arizona has been falling further and further behind in recent years when it comes to proficiency at a 4th grade reading level, which is an indicator of whether or not you're going to be able to graduate high school at all and have these opportunities available to you. So we really have to, at the same time, take 2 steps forward and 1 step back and ensure that we're getting the basics and the fundamentals right and making sure kids are on track to eventually be able to operate in this new world where they're going to have all these new skills that they will learn in new ways that we can't even imagine today, but they need to be able to read first.
That's obviously an important point, but Peter, I want to go back to technology a little bit more and talk about how that balances out and equity.
Sure.
I mean, we know we're never 100% fair on things, but I think when it comes to the advancing technology, you want to make sure that people are not left behind, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So how do we work that out?
Sure. I want to answer this from 2 perspectives. One is I am a proud 4th generation public educator. And as we talk about these innovations, we have and should continue to start with students, because the system must be student-centered in order to ensure all of the outcomes we want, an excellent education for every child. And because we are a human capital endeavor, we need to make sure that our teachers have the support with these new technological tools like AI to be able to use them to be more efficient and effective in their jobs too. If you are a teacher, AI can seem really, really scary. Instead of my student reading To Kill a Mockingbird, they're getting the summary from a chatbot. Well, how can I turn that around and really leverage technological tools to my advantage? And so a lot of school districts are really leaning to some great guidance that just recently came out from Arizona Institute on Education and the Economy to help them do that. To your second point around equity within our technological assets, we know from our survey data that 55% of rural Arizonans don't have high-speed broadband that they would need to be able to access a high-quality job or remote learning for students. One of the things we also know, while that needs to remain a priority for policymakers, is that in rural and remote communities, the schools are the places that do have fast internet access and broadband. And so we're supporting communities across Arizona that are in that circumstance to incubate new industries. We're working up in Chinle to advance cybersecurity pathways, which just need that quick access point. And we're doing that in communities across Arizona. And so what we're trying to do, while still keeping the eye on the ball in terms of internet access, is rethink how we can bring jobs to those communities using the tools they do have.
I think access is absolutely critical and important. But one of the things that I think we failed our students on is this idea that we thought that because they were born with technology, that they just know how to use technology. And that's a huge mistake that we've made. It's literally like saying, hey, when you were born, there were cars. You came home from the hospital with a car. Did anyone's parents at 16 say, here's a car, good luck, right? But we did that with technology, right? We say, here's a phone, here's a tablet, here's a laptop. When in reality is what we really need to focus on is teaching these kids how to utilize these tools and how to manage themselves, how to manage their technology, how to use these tools. And professional development for teachers is absolutely critical, especially with AI, because it comes at us so, why we're sitting here, 5 companies were born in AI, right? Yeah. So it's happening so fast that it's gonna, I don't know how to solve that. That's gonna be a huge problem, is how do we teach teachers how to use these tools at the pace at which these tools are coming at us? But I think it's absolutely critical. And here's a question for all of you. Like, how does Wi-Fi work? How does fiber work? What's an algorithm?
You unplug it and you plug it back in.
Right? These are questions that our kids
no
should
longer
know how
makes
to
that
answer.
sound.
Okay.
Yeah.
Katie, weigh in on this one.
Well, so I just wanted to add to what Peter is saying, and Jaime's got a great point too. And I think the important thing to focus on is we need to ensure that we have the flexibility in our school funding system to pay for these kinds of things. Right now, we have a funding system that is incredibly antiquated and has resulted in a tremendous amount of waste. We have $12 billion of real estate in district schools that's not being used. It was paid for by taxpayers, it was built by taxpayers to educate students, and it's not being used for anything. We have school buses that are at 45% capacity that are still driving around when there are innovations and better ways to move kids around. And so part of the reason that those things exist is that's how we fund schools. You know, we say we'll build you a new school and we'll never tell you when you have to close it or when you have to use those assets for other things. But we're now seeing there are a lot of needs. There are a lot of infrastructure needs, Wi-Fi, you know, high-speed internet, technology. And why are we wasting all of these resources on an old asset, which is real estate, that is not as necessary anymore and isn't being used today?
Nor do schools have the flexibility to maybe even lease it out, right?
Precisely.
To use it as another revenue stream, just because we, again, have an antiquated model.
Peter, let me get your thoughts on that. Because I'm curious, because there's certainly talk about waste and whatnot, and I think people honestly feel like there is some, but how do we balance the fact that the changing technology, money needs to be perhaps distributed in a different way? What does a model like that potentially look like?
One of the ways in which Arizona has really led on that front is through our instructional time models. So through legislation passed in 2021, we were able to become the first state in the country that actually divorced school funding from seat time. What that means is that now schools and districts can really invest in innovative models, project-based learning or work-based learning experiences, potentially tutoring opportunities, and not be worried about receiving very significant funding cuts for trying something new. And so one of the things that we're supporting schools and districts to do is leverage some of the existing policy flexibilities to really navigate a world with limited financial resources and be able to also, at the same time, meet the needs of every student. So over half of school districts have adopted an instructional time model, and early results are showing some pretty significant successes, especially in high schools that have one to support 9th grade learning outcomes, and in schools that are moving towards career and technical academies.
Jaime, again, I'm looking at you as our futurist, which is not fair, but the Google thing keeps distracting me. So what about what Arizona, other states need to be doing to balance out the fact that advanced technology is needed, it is expensive, but there are older models that people to some degree want to maintain. So what is the combination going forward to implement more technology while not, again, blowing people's minds right away to say, I don't understand what's going on here?
Right. Well, so I think Arizona has been very effective at trying to decouple those things, right? And I think it's important, like even in higher ed, can you really tell me that it takes 120 hours to get a psychology degree and 120 hours to get a computer science degree, and those are the same, right? So we have to decouple those things across the board. What we should do is focus on outcomes. What are the outcomes that we're looking for? What is it that we want to do? And the reality is that we still talk about graduations. What is graduation? Graduation from what? Right? Like, when do we stop graduating? I love to get rid of that model and start thinking about lifelong learning, because lifelong learning is really what it's about. The idea that you go to college for 4 years and then you're done, I remember that. I remember being in a computer lab, working on my last paper in graduate school, sending my paper to my dot matrix printer, that's how old I am, and sitting there going, I'm done. I never have to learn anything again. That wasn't true 30 years ago, and it's not true today. And so how do we create models where we stop talking about graduation and start talking about lifelong learning and continuous learning, so nothing's ever done, that we're constantly learning?
Jessica?
Well, and this is where Katie's comments around personalization and really sort of modular education comes in, right? And so I should be able to go to any university, and our universities are actually putting this flexibility in place and have it in place, and learn coding if I want to learn coding. And then I should be able to take a psychology class if I want to, and I should, and I should get the appropriate societal recognition that I had that skill, because that's really what a degree is, right? Society recognizes that you have a certain skill set, and so you are ready to go out and do stuff for society. And so we need to, again, and we're in the process of shifting that, but we need the business community's help, right? And we need all of your help. We need to be able to say, hey, we need different types of recognition in Arizona in order to capture job experience, in order to capture tutoring, and and the fact that I took a coding class and I know what it means now, which I really don't, but I throw it around like I do.
Well, I say this as someone who has an English degree, and my parents still don't know what that skill was. So I guess that means doing panels like this, which I'm proud to do. Katie, let me ask you about this. So we've talked about jobs that don't exist yet. So let me phrase it this way. What skills should Arizona students be learning today? And it could start as young as 3rd, 4th grade, or move into high school, move into colleges. Again, when we don't really know what the jobs may be, especially if they're, I'm going to use graduation, Jaime, sorry, but if they're still 10 years away from graduation, how do we know to what extent, what skills they're even going to need to know? How does that affect education at the younger level and even moving forward?
We know the fundamentals aren't going to change. They need to be able to read proficiently on grade level, on time, to be able to move throughout our system and continue to learn and to get that lifelong learning, that love of lifelong learning that is created when you can read and you can start to learn things and pick up on what's going on around you. And then they need human skills, like Jaime was saying. They need to know how to ask the right questions, how to be curious, how to navigate a changing world, how to learn new skills constantly, and recognize that, yes, they're never done learning because the world is going to keep changing.
Yeah.
Katie and I were talking earlier, and we've forgotten that learning is fun, right? And in maybe our traditional structure, we made it not fun for kids, right? But learning is really cool and can be a lot of fun. And we would love to kind of work with all of you to infuse that back into the conversation, right? Okay. Kids should be excited to read and to learn. I mean, I remember the first novel I read, it was magic, right? It took me to a whole nother world. And so it's like, we need to not forget that, but we need to make sure that our kids know that.
Mm-hmm. Peter, what about balancing this idea of the joy of learning, when you actually, wow, I learned something so exciting, I can't wait to tell somebody else, with the idea that we do have certain measurements,
of course,
that may in fact affect employment in the future?
Let's think about the measurements that really should affect employment in the future. A lot of those are credentials or certificates that have labor market value. Mm-hmm. A lot of those can be demonstrated in different competencies, right? Like maybe me giving a presentation on a topic because I'm more comfortable with that, a topic of choice. Maybe that's the way I demonstrate how I know something and somebody else can write a paper. We do have a law that allows for competency-based education, which is what that model is called, on the books here in Arizona. It hasn't yet been activated. And so those are some of the things that we know there's an appetite for from this conversation today, and from when all of us talk to students and parents. They want those different ways to demonstrate what they know. They want to choose their own book that they're reading for the first time. And so how can we give voice and choice to students and families in their education, help them ensure that they're driving it together, and also support our teachers who can't be just left along the wayside and doing what is a really, really hard job to meet the needs of every student.
So Peter, you mean not everybody should read The Grapes of Wrath?
Believe it or not.
What?
Yeah. I think we probably read very different books in high school, and we turned out okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Jaime, yeah, go
So
ahead.
I want to push back on this idea that learning is fun, because clearly you don't golf, because learning is also frustrating, and and there's friction, right? And learning happens that way too. And so I think that we need to also recognize and reward when kids struggle, when they get to something. And I think oftentimes what I see with kids is that they don't want to get a bad grade, and that's the problem with grades, or they don't want to look bad, or they don't want to fail. The word failure doesn't exist anymore. There is no such word as failure. If you fail, then there's an opposite word, which is success. And we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a world of constant and consistent iteration. And I think we need to teach our kids how to do that, how to iterate, how to do something, learn, get frustrated, deal with the friction, and then move on to, and that's where the joy comes in.
Yeah, that's fair.
I know you wanted to distract us with the golf thing, but I want to ask you just to put two of your kids on the spot.
Yeah.
Have you talked to the 34-year-old and the 11-year-old to see if they have a different love of learning? Have they learned in different ways? And have they learned in different ways based on what is inside of them as opposed to what's external?
Yeah, it all comes, I think that's a great question, because, I used to have this joke, because I have a 33-year-old, a 24-year-old, and an 11-year-old. And a couple years ago, my oldest wanted a Polaroid camera, and my middle kid's like, what's a Polaroid camera? And my little kid's like, what's a camera? Right? Like that's how fast technology has coming at us, right? And so I think at the core of all of it, what I try to teach my kids is that they should focus on purpose, right? And I think the same three things motivate all human beings. It's the same, no matter where you are in the world. It's three things: purpose, autonomy, mastery. And we've been talking about this, right? What's your purpose, right? What problem do you want to solve? Which is a question I ask kids all the time. Second is autonomy. How do you want to solve it? What book do you want to read? And then mastery. What are the skills, the knowledge, the abilities that you need to build to solve that problem that you're passionate about? If we can focus on that, then I think we can really create a good education system.
Okay, so how does the art of teaching fit into that? So Katie, let me start with you. The idea of what teachers are being taught themselves now as they prepare to enter the classroom, and how does that evolve as we look to the future? How should it evolve?
Yeah, I think it absolutely needs to change. The first thing I think needs to change in education is we think of teaching as something that you're going to start doing when you're 22 and until you retire. And I don't know about anyone on this stage, but I don't think anybody assumes that we're going to be in the same jobs 5 or 10 years from now, and especially young people. They want to go in and they want to start their career somewhere, and then they want to go try other things, especially as the world is changing as rapidly as it is. So I do think we all need to shift our thinking about what an educator looks like. It may not be a lifelong career anymore, and that's okay. I think we've been hyper-focused on educator retention, and we want educators to feel good about their jobs and be excited about their jobs, but it's okay if they want to go on and do other things too. And I think we need to train teachers how to use technology as a tool, but not as a substitute for one-on-one teaching. I think that's why you saw so much learning loss during the pandemic, was we thought we could just substitute technology for that one-on-one relationship that students have with an educator. And you can't. It can definitely be a tool. It should be a tool. It's going to be a tool in all of our jobs moving forward, how we use AI and technology. But it will never be a substitute for that personal relationship. And so I think teachers need to be trained in how to really challenge students, to Jaime's point, to help them to persevere and to overcome that frustration and friction that comes with learning. But they need to be able to know how to incorporate this technology in this changing world into their classrooms without substituting it for that relationship.
Peter, I want to give you a minute to respond to that.
Sure. The pandemic really showed what the research has told us all along, which is that learning is social and it is relational. It is that for our students and it is that for our educators. And so we're lucky here in Arizona at Arizona State University is really leading on reimagining strategic staffing models in schools. Through their Next Education Workforce program, they're noting that one teacher, one classroom, 30 kids is no longer really working out. And so they're completely reimagining what it looks like to engage community educators and teams of distributed expertise working together to support different student needs. I think that's a model that we've seen when it's done well and when it's scaled can work really well to support student outcomes.
Now it's time for an audience question. Isabella, thanks for being here. What's your question?
Thank you all so much, first of all, for such an engaging conversation. As you said, I'm Isabella Lisco. I'm an education solutions reporter with 13 News in Southern Arizona. And I'm wondering, how can we measure whether Arizona is really setting students up for the future but in a way that goes beyond test data, report cards, maybe goes back to that human skills conversation, because, you know, with report cards in mind, maybe they don't paint the full picture.
Jessica, what do you think?
I don't think we can. And I think the idea of wanting to measure it and have metrics around it makes us feel safer about the unknown that's going to be happening in all of these spaces, right? And that that the world is changing at a pace that we don't know what to measure because we don't know the questions to ask right now. But what I think we can do is we can ensure that we not only have a system for lifelong learning that we've talked about, right? We're not only teaching kids to get frustrated and then to have the joy of actually acquiring the skill, but that we're also talking to our job centers and really having close collaboration there with what they're seeing and what they need, right? And quite frankly, using Peter's data. Like the data they have is amazing, and it helps us understand trends, right? And then, you know, the research that Katie's organization does is really profound in how we can look at budgets better and differently, right? To use the resources, the limited resources we have, in order to really in order to meet tomorrow's needs, right? And, you know, the Google guy is just funny.
Yeah, well, we're going to give Jaime the last word on this. Jaime?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and I think there's this underlining tone that some of us feel, maybe you will feel at some point, which is, how do we define success as humans? How do we define success as people? How do we define success as students? And I think for years and years, it's been, you know, how big your house is, what neighborhood you live in, how much money you make, your stat. We still do it, right? Like, there's no podcast that are talking, every podcast that talks about success, they're not bringing common people up. They're always people who are successful or powerful or have status. But there's this underlining tone of like, that's not real success. Success is happiness. Success is finding purpose and meaning in life. And I think that's what we'll start seeing. And I'm partnering with Tempe Elementary School District, and we're building a new school. And the word school is loaded because we don't know what it's going to be. But it's going to be a place where students can come and identify what their purpose is, what their passions are, what their pathways are, what possibilities exist. And so the last thing I'll say about this when it comes to this whole idea is that there's this overtone around, you know, AI is coming to take our jobs, right? Hey, how about we flip that and say, hey, guess what? AI is coming to take our jobs. Isn't that awesome? Right? Like, now that AI is coming to take our jobs, maybe we can focus on what we're passionate about, what we care about, what we really want to do. Because I don't know any kid who's like, I want to go spend the rest of my life sitting in a cubicle looking at Excel spreadsheets, right? So that is, I think, how we should be measuring success is, do our kids have meaning? Do they have purpose? Do they have passion? That's what I hope we measure.
Amazing panel. You guys did not underdeliver. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Peter Boyle, Jaime Casap, Jessica Pacheco, Katie Ratlief, thank you all for being here. And thank you all for joining us as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.